The bread was always the same, a small white loaf from the bakery 2 blocks down, the kind that cost $1.69 and came wrapped in thin paper that tore if you squeezed it too hard. Dale Mercer bought one every Tuesday and Thursday morning before his shift began, left it on the bench outside the loading dock of the Caldwell Solutions building, and never said much more than good morning. He did not know her name. He knew she was old, that she sat on that bench every time he arrived, and that she always looked like she was waiting for something that had not come yet. He bought the bread because she looked like someone who needed it. That was the whole reason. That was enough. Nobody noticed. The security guards walked past without slowing down. The executives who parked in the garage adjacent to the loading dock moved through the side entrance without glancing toward the bench. The delivery drivers who pulled up at 6:45 in the morning were too busy with their manifests to look at an old woman sitting quietly with her hands folded in her lap. Dale noticed. He had been noticing things other people missed for the better part of 22 years, ever since the first morning he showed up at this building with a mop and a bucket and a paper form that said probationary employee at the bottom. He was the kind of man who noticed. It was not a gift exactly. It was more like a habit that had calcified into character. If you have ever been the person in the room that no one looks at directly, leave a comment below, because what happens next in this story is going to hit you somewhere you did not expect. Dale Mercer was 54 years old and had worked at Caldwell Solutions as a facility maintenance technician for 22 years. That was the official title on his badge, the one that had been updated 3 years prior when someone in human resources decided that janitor was imprecise. The badge said the new thing. The job was the same. He cleaned the floors on the first 3 floors of the East Wing, maintained the restrooms, managed the supply closet on the second floor, replaced light fixtures, unclogged drains, and on Fridays he waxed the lobby tile, which was the part of the job he liked best because the lobby was quiet on Friday mornings, and the light came through the glass front at an angle that made the waxed floor look like something worth looking at. He had never mentioned this to anyone. It was not the kind of observation a man in his position made out loud. His life outside the building was simple and ordered. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment 11 minutes away by bus, in a building that was not new but was clean, which was a distinction he appreciated. He had a daughter named Claire who was 26 and lived in another state, and called him every Sunday, which was the best part of his week. He had a small collection of paperback novels he kept stacked on the kitchen table because the bookshelf had broken years ago, and he had not gotten around to replacing it. He cooked his own meals, kept his bills current, and had not missed a day of work in 8 years, which was a fact he knew precisely because a chest cold in the winter of 2016 had cost him 2 sick days, and he had not forgotten it. He was not a man who expected much. He had learned that lesson the way most people learn it, not through philosophy, but through the gradual weight of experience, pressing the excess out of a life, until what remained was what actually held. He had wanted more once. He had had plans once, the soft, unspecific kind that live in the future and feel like certainty because they have not yet met the present. None of them had worked out in the ways he had imagined. But he had built something out of what remained, and it was solid, and it was his, and he had learned to respect that in a way that took longer to learn than he would have preferred, which made what was about to happen to him entirely impossible to predict. The woman on the bench had started appearing in late September. Dale had noticed her the first morning she was there because she was wearing a coat that was too light for the temperature, and she was sitting very still in a way that suggested she was not resting exactly but waiting. She was somewhere in her middle to late 70s, with white hair pulled back neatly and hands that rested on the handle of a canvas bag. She was not disheveled. She did not look lost. She looked like someone who had arrived somewhere deliberately and was prepared to remain there. He had passed her without a word that first day. On the second day she was there again, in the same position, and he said good morning as he went by, and she said good morning back in a voice that was clear and unhurried. On the third day she was there, and he was carrying a cup of coffee from the cart on the corner, and he stopped and asked her if she wanted one. She said she did not drink coffee, but she thanked him with a sincerity that was not performative. She just meant it. It was the following Tuesday that he had bought the bread. He had passed the bakery, seen the loaves in the window, and thought about her sitting there with the canvas bag, and he had gone in and bought one and carried it to the bench without a plan for how the exchange would go. He just said here and held it out, and she took it without making a fuss, which he appreciated more than he could have explained. They talked for about 11 minutes that morning. She asked him what he did in the building. He told her. She asked how long he had been doing it. He told her that too. She listened the way people used to listen before they learned to listen only for the pause where they could begin speaking again. She actually listened. He noticed that. It became a pattern across the next 2 months. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Dale would arrive with the bread. She would be on the bench, and they would talk for 10 or 15 minutes before he went inside. He learned that she had a fondness for very cold water and very strong tea in that order. He learned that she had grown up in a small town in the middle of the country, one of 5 children, and that her father had worked in a textile mill and her mother had kept a garden that she described with a precision that suggested she had thought about it recently, not just in the distant way people talk about childhood. He did not ask her what she was doing sitting outside the building every Tuesday and Thursday morning. He did not think it was his place to ask that. She learned things about him too. He was not practiced at talking about himself, but she had a way of asking questions that made answering feel natural rather than exposing. She knew about Claire. She knew about the paperback novels. She knew that he had grown up in this city, that his father had been a mechanic who died when Dale was 31, that his mother was still alive and living in a care facility across town, and that he visited her every other Saturday. She knew that he had taken this job at 32 when he was between things, and had never found a reason to leave. She never told him her name. He never asked. The mornings on the bench became a thing he looked forward to in the particular way that simple, reliable pleasures become anchors in a person's week. He was not a man who used the word meaningful easily. He would not have described those conversations using that word if someone had asked him at the time, but he would have been able to tell you, with some precision, that Tuesday and Thursday mornings felt different from the other 5 days. That the walk from the bus stop to the loading dock on those mornings had a different quality. That he was more awake by the time he reached the building than on the days when the bench would be empty. He noticed that too, and filed it in the same interior place where he kept all the things he noticed, and did not have anyone particular to tell. The woman seemed to feel something similar, though neither of them ever said so directly. She was always on the bench when he arrived, never hurrying to get there, as if she had been there long enough already to be settled. She never looked at her phone. She never looked distracted. She was just there in the way that people are rarely just anywhere anymore, fully present on a bench in the cold, with her canvas bag and her clear, unhurried voice. Dale thought about that occasionally on the other mornings, the empty bench mornings, and he thought about how uncommon it actually was, a person who was simply where they were, doing what they were doing, without the static of somewhere else pulling at them. There are moments in a person's life that do not announce themselves as the ones that will matter later. They feel like ordinary mornings. They feel like bread and cold air and a bench, and 10 minutes before a shift begins. You do not know, while you are living them, that you are inside the moment that will change everything. This is how it works. And Dale Mercer had no idea. The Thursday morning in early December, when everything shifted, arrived like any other. The temperature had dropped overnight, and the bench had a faint rime of frost on the slats that the woman was sitting on top of anyway, because she was that kind of person. Dale had the bread in a paper bag, and he had also, without planning it, brought a second cup of coffee from the corner cart, even though she had said she did not drink it, because he had a thermos of tea from home that he thought she might prefer. He had not said anything to himself about why he was bringing it. He had just done it. She looked up when he came around the corner, and she said good morning in her clear, unhurried way, and he sat down on the bench beside her and handed her the bread and the thermos, and she looked at the thermos for a moment, and then she looked at him, and she said thank you in a way that was different from the other times, fuller somehow, like it was carrying more weight than the words could hold on their own. They talked for a while, the usual things. Claire had called that Sunday with some news about a promotion. His mother had been having a good week. The lobby tile needed re-waxing sooner than scheduled because someone had dragged something across it that had left a mark he had not been able to get out yet. She listened to all of it the same way she always did. Then she said something he did not understand at first. She said, "I own this building." He looked at her. She said it again, quietly, not to startle him, just to be clear. She said her full name for the first time, Evelyn Caldwell. She said she had founded Caldwell Solutions 41 years ago in a rented office in the east quarter of the city, with 2 employees and 1 contract, and that the company now employed 437 people across 7 offices in 4 states, and that the building behind them, the one Dale had mopped the floors of for 22 years, bore her name because it was hers. Dale sat with that for a moment. The morning traffic was moving on the street beyond the parking structure. A delivery truck idled somewhere behind them. The thermos in her hands caught a thin angle of early light. None of it stopped. The world continued in its ordinary way, completely indifferent to the fact that something had just shifted in the air between 2 people on a bench. He said, "I've been mopping your floors for 22 years. She said, "I know, I've been reading your file." He did not know what to say. He said, "Why are you sitting out here on a bench in the cold?" And she said something that he would think about for a long time afterward. She said that she had spent 41 years walking through that building, and everyone inside it had always known who she was before she arrived. She said that got very loud after a while. She said some mornings she just needed to sit somewhere quiet and have someone talk to her like she was just a person on a bench. She looked at the thermos in her hands, and she said he had been the only one who did that, for 2 months, every Tuesday and Thursday, the only one. If you have ever given something small to someone without expecting anything in return, you already know that this is not actually a small thing. Stay with me, because we are not finished yet. What happened in the following 2 weeks was not something Dale had any framework for. He was called into the Director of Operations office on a Monday morning, which had never happened in 22 years, and informed that Evelyn Caldwell had personally submitted a review of his service record, his attendance history, and a written account of her interactions with him over the preceding 2 months. The Director of Operations, a man named Gerald who was professionally warm in a way that felt like a corporate policy, told Dale that based on this review, he was being offered a newly created position, Facilities and Culture Liaison. The role involved working with building management across all 7 offices, training new maintenance staff, and serving as a direct point of contact for Evelyn herself on facility concerns. It came with a salary that was 3 times what Dale currently earned, full benefits, and an office which was a word Dale had never associated with himself before. Gerald said Evelyn had one note she had asked him to pass along. The note said, "A man who notices things other people miss is exactly the kind of man I have needed on my team for 22 years. I'm sorry it took me this long to look at the bench." Dale read it twice. He sat in the chair across from Gerald's desk and he looked at the words on the note, and he felt something move through him that he did not immediately have a name for. It was not exactly surprise. It was not exactly gratitude, though it was something adjacent to both of those things. It was closer to recognition, the feeling of being seen by someone who had looked carefully, and the disorienting weight of realizing that it had happened without your knowing it was happening. He had gone about his mornings without a thought to what they might mean to someone else. He had just been himself, on a bench, with bread, because that was what the situation had called for, and he was the kind of man who tried to respond to what situations called for. He folded the note and put it in the chest pocket of his uniform. He said he would take the job. There is a version of this story where Dale Mercer's decency is described as a strategy, where the bread and the conversation and the thermos of tea are framed as a calculated investment that paid out in the end. That version is wrong. Dale did not know. He had no way to know. He bought bread because someone looked like they could use it. He talked because she was worth talking to. He brought the tea because he had thought of her in the morning and acted on it without turning the thought into a transaction. Decency that is waiting for a return is not decency. It is a very slow form of negotiation. What Dale had was not that. What Dale had was simpler and rarer and harder to manufacture. Evelyn Caldwell, for her part, told the story only once publicly, at a company address the following spring. She said that she had learned something on a bench outside her own building that she had not learned in 4 decades of running a company. She said that the most important test of a person's character is not how they behave when the stakes are visible. It is how they behave when they believe no one significant is watching. She said Dale had passed that test every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 months, with a $1.69 loaf of bread, and the willingness to sit down and actually listen. The people around Dale in the building treated him differently after that, which was something he observed with the same patient attention he had always given to the things around him. Some of them were warm in a new and slightly uncomfortable way, as if they were not sure what register to use with a man who had cleaned their floors yesterday and sat in an office today. Others were genuinely kind, the kind that did not require recalibration, because it had not been calculated in the first place. He noticed which was which. He always had. What he never did was pretend that the outcome changed the nature of what he had done. He had not bought the bread in order to be seen. He had bought it because she was there, and she looked like she could use it. The outcome was real, and he was grateful for it, but he knew with the same certainty that had kept him showing up for 22 years without an audience that the thing itself had always been complete regardless of what followed. A kindness that needs the reward to justify it was not quite the same thing. He had never needed that. He had needed the thermos of tea at 6:30 in the morning to feel like the right thing to do. And it had, and that had been enough. The bench is still there. Dale sometimes sits on it during his lunch break now, which is a thing he was not able to do before, because his old lunch break was 11 minutes and the new one is an hour. He says he thinks better out there. He says the cold air is good for the thinking. He has not said anything to the security guards about the bench or about the woman or about how 22 years of quiet work had led, finally, to someone turning around and seeing him. He does not need to explain it. He already knows what it means. The question for you is this: think about the people in your life who work quietly in rooms you pass through, the ones whose names you might not know, the ones who keep things running while everyone else's attention is pointed somewhere else. Have you ever stopped long enough to actually see them? Because some of those people, it turns out, are exactly who you need. They were just waiting on a bench for someone willing to bring the bread. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this one, you know what to do.